I mean,
All of
That
it.
is private.
I mean, this is a project, and we don't know. We don't know when Stone Quarry is going to go deeper. We don't know if we're going to have a drought and it doesn't rain here for the next 20 years. But based on past projections, based on what we have, going down 80 foot in 20 years, we have another 30 to 40 years before they get down to a depth that will affect the 2 wells that are currently in the ground that need hooked up, the wells that are 400 foot. If they continue with the trends that they have in the past, that's what we're looking at, is another 30 to 40 years based on those trends.
Does the stone quarry have the right to dig to whatever depth they want?
600 feet, ain't it?
Well, they can dig deeper than that. They have quarries in Indiana that are at depth of 600 feet. Currently, they're at 200 feet.
But they can go to 600 anytime they choose.
But they've given us assurances that they're not going to expand
Is
in the
that
next
correct?
few years.
In the next 5 years. It is correct, they can go to any depth they want, barring the county can put some regulations on them if it's tied to safety or some other factors. But at the moment, they could go down to a depth, whatever they want. Sorry, I have a question back there. I got to keep
It
these.
was shared at the public hearing Monday night that it would take roughly $800,000 to bring well 7 online. It was also shared to the council for the first time that there's money through grants through the USDA's Rural Development Program that could be $1 to $2 million. And the council came back and said that that was the first time they'd basically been given that information to get that grant money. So I think that's something we need to be pursuing rather than going in debt.
Mr. Julian, do you want to address
He
this?
doesn't need to speak again. He's the one that gave that information. He gave it to me because I asked.
Well, for everybody else that wasn't there in Monday's meeting, it may be helpful.
Yes, USDA is a federal program that provides funding for municipal water and sewer projects. It's primarily a long-term loan program. They do have a pool of grant money that's allocated both to the state and the ability to petition their national office for grant money. It's a competitive process. One of the key measures in the competition are how much are they assisting you in buying down your rate. Those communities with the highest rates and those communities that face the highest increases in those rates score more competitively for pursuing the grants. Your rates, as we discussed last week and previously, on a comparative basis around Indiana, are below average, significantly lower than the projects that are getting grant funded. And so from a competitive standpoint, you've got a challenging story to tell why you would get grant money. As we also discussed last week, the process of going to the grant or going even through the loan application is a federal program. The federal government does not move quickly. They are a very bureaucratic process in terms of what you have to ask for, how you need to ask for it. It will delay this project a couple of years. However, the fact that you're discussing breaking this into phases does leave open the door to approach USDA and evaluate whether it makes sense to try to secure funding for this project. And as I said, since rate comparisons or rate impacts is a major issue, going through the first phase and increasing your rates actually makes you more competitive in terms of having a better story to tell to RD if there is in fact grant money to be received. The thing that you always have to be careful of when pursuing grants is the clock never stops running. And when you're talking about a project of this magnitude, if you're slowing down the process, starting construction, and it adds a couple of years to the timetable, then you're not talking about a $14 million project. You're going to talk about the inflationary impacts on cost, moving that up. So every dollar that you lose because of inflation devalues the benefit of that grant. So that's the balancing act that you always have to keep in mind as pursuing grants. You don't want to take one step forward and get the grant 2 steps back because of cost increases.
That's probably the reason we've tried to ask to have those grants looked into a long time ago, and it was never recognized or pursued. Plus the fact, if you wait until the second phase to apply for that and you don't get it, what does that do for applying for a grant after that?
Well, you have this control of the project, timing line. When you're going through the local level, you control the timetable. Whenever you look for outside favorable funding assistance, whether it's the state SRF program, rural development, you have to fit the timetable of their projects. So what does it do? You'll have another point in time where you have to make a decision. Is it worth continuing to go after those grants, or do we go to Plan B?
Are they going to give us a grant if all our construction is done?
No, I don't think any of the scenarios we talked about would go after grants after construction is completed, because there isn't a program that I'm aware of, I feel pretty comfortable in saying this, that there isn't a program out there that's going to give you grant money after the fact. That just doesn't fit into the
So we put all our grant eggs in one basket and do it at the beginning of the second phase, when we should have been doing it 6 months ago or a year ago, and certainly before the first phase.
And those are good questions. One of the things that might be helpful, given the questions that came up last week, we compiled some rate information. In addition to this, this is community specific. UMBA does a comparative utility rate study, both on water and wastewater. And I'm not expecting anybody to.
Can I have a copy? Can I have a copy?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'll
sir.
pass these out in just a minute, but Lane, maybe you could pass it. I don't expect those reports to be something you're going to look at this evening. What we did was we took, well, let me give you the background. For the last 50 years, UMBA has prepared a comparative utility rate study for the state of Indiana. And we update it every few years. This is a report that was done in 2016. So a couple years have passed. I don't believe any communities are lowering rates. So when we do a comparison, we're probably looking at rates that are either these rates or something higher. And the rates are designed to compare a water and sewer bill using 4,000 gallons. 4,000 gallons is a standard that's used both by SRF and by rural development to allow them to compare communities against each other and to measure the impact their loan programs can provide, the benefit that can be provided through their low interest loans or grants. In the state of Indiana, there's about 350, 370 communities that have participated in our survey. If we break that pool down and compare it to communities of similar size to Delphi, there's about 120 to 130 communities in that pool. And right now, the average of those 130 for water bill is $26.50 for 4,000 gallons. And a sewer bill of $43.44 for a total monthly bill for water and sewer just under $70. The town of Delphi, with your current rates, water's at just under $23, sewers just over $20, for a total of around $43 a month for water and sewer. you can see that there might be, now in our comparison, there is not a community that is lower than that. You're the lower of the 10 or 12 communities that we have there. And you can see the dates of the last rate increases. The reason we wanted to present this information is not to discourage you from pursuing grant programs, but to have a realistic expectation, because, as I said, the competition for those grant dollars are to buy down the monthly water bill and sewer bill, become more affordable. And you're behind in your comparisons because many of these communities have already have rates substantially higher than yours, which is the case. There were about 4 or 5 communities that were cited in an email. We specifically wanted to look at those, and you can see why they're getting grants, because even with those grants, they're going to be substantially higher utility bills than you receive, than you currently are, and will be with the full cost of the project. So again, I'll repeat, I'm not doing this to discourage you from looking at grants, but you have to be realistic in pursuing them as to what your success rate is going to be.
But I think if our council had been made aware of that option long before Monday night and last week, something might have been able to have been done a long time ago. Because they sat right there and said that was the first they were hearing, that these grant monies from the USDA Rural Development were available.
Can I have a copy of that, Bowie?
Yeah, I've got maybe a dozen copies here. Does anyone else? Mayor, do you mind? Anyone else wants them? I'll just pass this around. Go ahead and grab one if you want one. The answer to that question is, I think there was a question. Let me just answer that. Whether you knew it or didn't know it, it wouldn't change the fact. The reason there hasn't been, at least from UMBA's perspective, an awful lot of talk about an Okra grant for $500,000 or $600,000, a rural development program, is because our role here is not to steer you to SRF or steer you to rural development. Our role is to give you advice as to what's the right funding plan to accomplish the project you need to accomplish and result in the most reasonable utility rate. And when we talked about that, we talked about SRF is your plan A. It still is your plan A. I believe when it's all said and done, it will be your plan A. But you have to have a plan B. And that's why breaking this into 2 phases allows you to pursue those options. And you'll find out if they bring enough to the program to make it into the funding plan that results in the best solution for this project for the town. But that's why there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about Okra or RD, because ultimately they are probably, they're definitely not Plan A, and they're distant Plan B and Plan C.
Another point I'd like to make is that I don't think we were prepared to have those discussions because we didn't have analysis back on well 7, which we drilled. Superintendent Myers, do you remember when we drilled well 7? I thought we tested it because at the first water meeting we had back in March, maybe, we didn't have the results back from that. Right. And then since then we've been discussing options and which way to go. We still haven't executed contracts with Ice Miller and Umball and Beller, Fairman, and Seifert to get us to closing of the pool program because it's still up in the air which way we're going to go.
What are the different options you're talking about?
Well, I mean, we had discussed surface treatment, we discussed floor, the TASE, this.
we've discussed them, but we've not seen any solid figures from them other than your estimates and what you say come from Butler, Fairman, and Cypher. But as far as the due diligence of any of this, we've not seen that. You give us numbers that you, and I've asked you directly.
Could you
and
speak
said,
up,
well,
please? Can't hear you back here.
Okay, I'm sorry. The numbers that you have given on these preliminary reports, I've asked you if those are solid numbers that came from engineers or where they've come from, and you've responded that they're your estimates combined with Butler, Fairman, and Cypher's figures. And frankly, that doesn't do it for me. I mean, I don't believe that is a solid amount of figures to be able to compare with what you've really solidly looked into.
Well, comparisons are, besides surface water treatment, which I think Butler Fairman's talked about a bit, we've got the Tays, we've got 4. One's 4 miles away, one's 8 miles away. We've got 2 wells in the ground at 400 foot that need connected. They need buildings. We need ground storage and aeration. If you're looking at the cost of pipe, which estimated to 250 to 300 foot per lineal foot, for 4 miles and 8 miles, I can tell you alone that the cost of those projects are going to far exceed the cost of the project of staying here in the current well field.
Not when you take piping from Flora and tell everybody that it's got to be 20 inches. That doesn't have to be 20 inches. 12 inches would cover that. But you inflated it to make this look like a better deal, and that's not right.
I inflated it based on the numbers that Butler Fairman Cypher provided to get water from the Tays, which was a 16 to 20 inch pipe, and I think they settled on 20, so that in the future we wouldn't have to put another pipe in the ground if we needed increased capacity. Or else you're going to spend a lot more money in the future to dig another 12-inch pipe back into town.
From there, yes. From Flora, I disagree.
Well, if we have growth, we can still have growth if we got our water from Florida. You still need to have capacity for growth.
Yes.
So if we only put a 12-inch from Florida here, we have the same problem if we put a 12-inch from anywhere. You're going to have to go, if we have growth and we need more water, houses, businesses, whatever, and now we got to go back and replace our 12 with a 20. I mean, it only makes sense to me that you better be prepared for growth and put in a 20. So I would figure on that.
I would agree with that, except that you're adding water to the already water we've got. I mean, you're not replacing it and that being the sole water source that we have. That's in addition to the water we already have and are juggling right now. So it's not
Can you do that? Can you mix and match a water treatment plant with a ground well?
I'm going to have to, so Flora has a water treatment plant, but it's still a groundwater treatment plant with iron and manganese.
Yeah.
So they're using wells in Flora. I'm fairly certain they're using wells in Camden. Is that correct? Do you guys know?
Yes.
You could get it from groundwater or from
They're
surface
wel-
water. Apologize.
They're wells just like ours, but they go through a filtration system for iron and manganese.
So it's still, they still have wells. It's just that they have higher iron and manganese concentrations. We're operating under an assumption based on 20 years of statistics or more that wells 4 and 5, our largest producing wells of the city of Delphi, are going to go dry. We continue to operate under that assumption, which is the same assumption we've been operating under back in 1996 when well 4 dropped 10 feet in 2 weeks. And we looked to the floor property, we were looking at a property before that and drilling a well. Then we can't assume that those 2 wells are going to continue to produce water for us in the future.
Mr. Matt Spidell just said that we have 3 to 5 years before the fear of running dry will take place. Now, I realize that's a guess, but that's not the urgency that we've been hearing of, gosh, next week we may be out of water.
You know, speak on that. Superintendent Myers?
I've been here in 3 to 5 years since I've been here 19 years.
Mhm.
There's any chance tomorrow you come in and be dry. I mean, it's, all this stuff on this project is stuff we have to do, we need to do. I mean, it's pretty simple. Even if we go to Tays in the future, this is stuff that we still are gonna have to do.
All we have to keep and stuff.
No, Ms. Milburn, and then, we're trying to keep them in order, so.
So wait, how
Oh.
long?
Sorry.
So the two wells that you have, that you said were at the 400 feet, is that 3 and 5?
3 and 7.
3 and 7. Okay, so when you're talking about the wells are gonna potentially go dry, the one, not 3 and 7, just the other ones that are, because the stone quarry doing whatever they're gonna do. What's special about 3 and 7, that if we hook them up and spend all this money, and they still do all their drilling and all of that, what's special about those two that they won't go dry?
They're 200 foot below.
They're 200 foot below where they're at now.
Correct. The other wells, I wish Peerless was here. Well 4, we can't drop the pump anymore. Well
But
5,
I'm saying if
they go down to
they
600
lie,
foot, all the
if
wells.
they lie and they go down to 425 feet,
We'd be cutting it close with wells 3 and 7.
but then you only have 2 wells,
Correct.
because the other ones are not done, because
Right.
you're
And those
below
might be
their
done if
threshold.
they're at 425.
So even if we spend the money that you're proposing and doing the plan that they're saying, it is zero guarantee that they're not gonna go lower and drain those within 2 years, 3 years. I mean,
That's,
they're giving you their word, I understand that, but
Things change.
they may decide, you know what? For our business, we need to do X, Y, Z. Sorry if that affects the citizens of Delphi.
I don't run a mining
I
operation.
I don't think they're gonna do that either, but I don't think I would like to think IPC's not gonna leave if these water rates go sky high. They may leave. I hope not, but you can't, I just don't know what's special about spending all the money only to find out that they've changed their mind or they've not been honest with you or upfront and now they're gonna go to 450 feet or 425 or whatever, and all this money that we just spent could be gone in 2 years.
So where do you think we should spend the money?
I know, I think we need to do something, I agree, but I'm saying there's gotta be something else just than that, because you can't,
Actually, Sharon, most of that money is just to get our structure, our water structure back to be able where we'll be. The good thing is we have the 2 400-foot wells that will take us through for a while so we can get our piping done. That's what I was saying earlier. We're still gonna have to go somewhere else and do something for a water source.
but is there a way that we can just do the well, you know, just do the minimum? Or are you saying the 14 million, that's the minimum? You cannot spend any dime less, and it has to all be done now.
How many years will, if you do this projection, how many years will it take to do this projection, all these little projects into one? How many years?
So, sure, so this forecast, phase 1 projects begin in 2019. Those would be completed in 2020. Phase 2 would begin again then in 2020, and we would anticipate those projects would take another, 365 days, so finishing up in 2021.
So we're up to 3 years already just to even try to do the project. So,
Which is
you wanna wait till 5 years is up, run out of water, and then say, oh, I guess we should have started 3 years ago?
Which is a temporary fix.
Well,
We
But
know
isn't
that.
everything a temporary fix
I mean, we
unless
know
you
that.
have a
That's what I
final
started to
answer?
clarify in the beginning, is that we know that this isn't the end result. This is just to get us to a point where we can move on to the end result, hoping the 2 400-foot wells.
Well, hold us until we get there.
Right.
Well, no. Everything is a temporary fix. 20 years ago, we built Deer Creek tank and the Hilltop tank. We should have done maintenance on them in 10 to 15 years, and we haven't. If we don't do something soon, it's gonna cost a lot more to repair. We see that with the Armour Road tank. We're gonna see that with the IPC tank in the future, which isn't in the plans, but we're hoping to build in enough operation and maintenance and capital cost within the rate structure that we can do that in the next 5 to 10 years. Question as to, could we do less?
I mean, I don't know, I mean, you guys are the ones that have studied it all, I'm just asking,
Sure we could.
is there a way that we can just do this small amount, wait a couple years, and then do another chunk, and then wait, to make it more
That
doable
was kind of my
for,
question, is that
Yeah.
when we start phase 1, I mean, we're not gonna fork out 15 million right away. You're gonna have so many million this year, so many million, is that how it gets paid for, or do you have to fork out the whole 15 million at once?
So do you want to speak to the rates with the
The
phasing?
rates are gonna go up 140%
Not
immediately.
water bill rates, I'm talking on project rates.
The primary answer to that in the state of Indiana is you're going to have a contract to do this work. You have to be able to show that you could pay for that and not bet on the come that there's going to be money available. So that's why you do the long-term or the borrowing. So that's the answer. You got to have that money. So the 14 million is going to be broken into 2 phases, but each phase you have to have financing in place to take care of the
So to put it
project.
in English, you have to take out all 14 million or whatever at once, even though the work's not gonna be done for
No,
next
2
year.
steps, but
Two steps.
2 steps, but before you do the contracts for the construction of each phase, you got to be able to pay it.
Right.
So the rates, and John, forgive me if I'm wrong, the rates, the 2 phases are approximately $7 million each, 6.5, somewhere in that range. So the rates would be structured stepwise, I assume,
Correct.
so that beginning in, I think you said last week, October, but realistically, probably November, December this year, if not January next year, we would see that,
Hit the
we
bill.
would see the rate increase for the first phase, so approximately half the rate increase, and then half about a year later.
Correct.
And what do you estimate the first phase to cost?
Well, we haven't done
Based
the,
on
yeah,
your best information.
we haven't done the study, but the numbers that you've been hearing are correct, about a 135% increase, So-
Both phases.
both phases. Your
Combined,
current,
sorry.
yeah, your current bill, as we just showed, is around $23 a month. If the impact is across the board of 135%, you're talking roughly $31. So roughly $15 the first phase and $16 the second. Well, probably be a little higher in the first phase. Say $16 the first phase and $15. Now that is back of the envelope. The rate study still needs to be done. But when you do this project right now, your rates are generating $1 million a year. When it's all said and done and you roll in the cost of paying off the debt for the $14 million project, funding the additional operating costs for the new infrastructure, funding the cash reserves that are going to be a part of your commitment to the bond buyers, your $1 million revenues are going to need to go to around $2.3 million.
Sorry, I had a question from the back. Sorry, Councilman Garrison, why don't you speak? And then, yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, my first thing is I'm provided, I guess, as a business owner here in Delphi to see that we're probably doing something about this. And I would like to say that I'm all for fixing our infrastructure, but I'd like to see a permanent solution plan at the same time, you know. This is what we're gonna do for the next 3 years, but this is what we're doing in the next 5. You know, we're gonna go to the Cape in the next 5 years, or we're gonna go to Florida in the next 5 years, or 10 years, whatever that may be. I completely understand that we need to fix, get well 7 online, put this treatment facility in, you know, I've worked up here with some of this stuff, you know, with my own business. I know what kind of shape it's in, I know what kind of issues we have, and I completely agree. If we don't do something soon, we could potentially have catastrophic issues. With that, I'd like to ask you, I guess, as far as this rate buy-down program for the grant money, you're saying that at $23 is what we currently are compared to everybody else's 26. That's just for the water. So will they not take into consideration that our water bill is going to be exponentially higher than everybody else's? I mean, the other $20-some, $30-some, I'm sorry, $40-some you're talking about is actually on the sewer side. Our sewer bill is not going to raise. You know, we have, by what you were talking about earlier, we have one of the cheapest sewer bills in the state of Indiana. It's $26 versus $46. Our overall utility cost is going to go up, but our water bill is fairly close to what it sounds like everybody else's is at $23 to $26.
Keep in mind, when we give the comparison of all the 120, that's not 120 communities going for grant money.
Right.
When you're comparing yourself for the grant programs, they are looking to buy down the utility bills into the $55 range.
So are they looking to buy down the whole bill though, or will they look at just the water portion? So I guess is my question, because we have a cheap sewer bill and I hope it stays that way, but you know, our water bill comparably seems to be than everybody else's, where we're gonna increase our water bill from, you're talking about the average being $26 to potentially $40 within 3 years
The grant programs are gonna look at the utility they're funding.
as a whole.
Yeah, but it's one of the it's one of the factors, but that's the primary factor. And, you know, if you're considering that there is a longer-term solution that's going to be required, and if these other infrastructure projects like treatment and storage and upgrading distribution or whatever else is in the part of the project need to be done, what you're doing is setting the table by getting those paid for within your current rates and charges to position yourself to be more competitive for grants for the long term. Now, I don't know, you know, nothing stays still. So if you needed to do that other source of water supply in 10 years or 20 years, what the grant program look like in that time frame is anyone's guess. But common sense tells you grant programs are not going to just give grants to communities because they like the communities. They like all the communities. They're going to give grants to the communities that cause the utility rates to be brought down to a level that they believe is affordable. So when we talk about buying a rate down to $55 a month on a water bill for 4,000 gallons, and you're currently at 23, you're not being very competitive in asking for that. And when you talk about the potential impact of this project taking you into the neighborhood where grants come into play, that gives you a pretty good indication that you're not going to get a whole bunch of grant money. They're not going to give it to Delphi at the sacrifice of somewhere else where their rates are already $50, $60, $70 a month.
I had a question. You've been our financial advisor for a number of years. Why did you not say, it looks like you're going to have some water issues, you better start raising your rates for the last 10 years? I mean, we raised them in 2013.
Might be worth going back to the minutes of some of the meetings we've had.
2008,
Yes.
I was just going to bring that up because people are questioning time. I know it's not good. If I knew this meeting was going to be here, I was going to ask for Leanne to go back to 2008 when these same Peerless and all these people were sitting here and we did this, and really look what the 10 years, 2008, 2018, what that different cost is now. We waited 10 years, kicked that can down the road again. I'd like to know them differences because you did give us that information, I'm sure of it. And I bet it's in the minutes because we've been on this street 10 years ago. And I'll bet it's 20, 30% more now than it was in 2008. Probably low end there.
I mean,
The way
costs
things
are
changing.
costs of, yeah. I mean, it's everything is more expensive than we were 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, 10 years ago, I can say, yes, that could have been the conversation. But even 5 years ago, why didn't you say, in order to be